Welcome back to your favorite rugby podcast. This is me, Elle, and as usual,
what do you do?
There he is. It's Timothy Josh. We're getting into the single digits now. The World Cup is a sniff away. How are you feeling?
Goosebumps. Yeah, things are really starting to ramp up. I can feel the excitement. I'm really keen to not even watch just the Springboks, but just for the World Cup to start. The rugby that was played over the week was also really good. So
absolutely, I echo all of your sentiments. I think this one is going to be a great one. There's just so much to look forward to, and we'll get into some of that today. Let me just give you a quick outline what you can look forward to in today's show. We'll have a look back at the weekend's matches, specifically the Boks and the All Blacks. We'll bring you some news from all around the world, and then we'll look at other results. There were some big ones. And then we'll do more of an in-depth review of that All Blacks match. But like it seemed during the trophy presentation, we won't harp on it too much because the hard work starts now. So we're just going to, have a moment to celebrate and take out some of the highlights, but then also look at what needs to be tweaked before that big opener against Scotland. And then, of course, if it is your first time joining us, where have you been? Because today in episode 3, we continue our building of the all-time greatest Springbok lineup. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking on 2 positions again because we're doing a lock combination. Those are positions 4 and 5. They're our line-out heroes. Timothy, I'm very excited to hear your takes in this position. Any hints? Am I going to be surprised? Are you going way back or are you keeping it current?
I'm keeping it current. Yeah, there's some really standout performers more recently, I would say.
Okay.
And I think there's certain players that have definitely sort of become synonymous with the number.
Tim, I have a slight bone to pick with you. When we first off air spoke about the match against the All Blacks, you weren't nearly as excited as I was expecting you to be. I mean, it was literally record-breaking victory. It was a beautiful match. It was enjoyable. It had so many good things, but you were, you were tentative in your celebrations. Please tell me why. Because if we're going to go any further with this, I need to understand.
Yeah, for me, the match, I think after the match shock sort of echoed what I was feeling about this match in particular, saying that, we still haven't won a single point for the Rugby World Cup. As much as and as good as the victory felt and as dominant as the performance was, we still need to keep perspective. I'm not going to trade a record win on the All Blacks and, fall out at the group stages. That would not be a success for me. I appreciate it and I definitely enjoyed the match, but for me the main concerns were obviously no injuries, seeing how the team is doing. Yeah, from that perspective, I'm very happy from what I saw, and we're looking to kick on against Scotland. I think that will be the main event.
I accept. I accept you're downplaying this victory. Looking at the responses in the media and specifically the New Zealand media and New Zealand supporters, it's just so weird that no one is going, oh, the Springboks, they did this right. They were really well prepared in that. This facet of the game, they did really well. They're not doing a lot of that. And It seems to me that they also can't place what exactly went wrong. Looking at the numbers, they gave away 15 penalties, they lost 5 lineouts, they of course had the 2 yellows and the red, so one could almost think that just down to discipline. Do you know, can you do them a favor? Can you tell them what went wrong for the All Blacks on Friday night?
Looking back, I saw a couple of stats in terms of how we progressed the ball and penalties for and against kicks in play as well. And like you said, it seems like the rhetoric around the match has been New Zealand losing it and not South Africa necessarily winning it, which I think is misplaced. I think South Africa did not give them the opportunity to have their usual way about things. And I think that should be very reflective for the coaching team, because I always just look back at the previous game in New Zealand in the Rugby Championship, where they dominated for most of the first half, and South Africa came back in the second, had a spell of dominance, but then, we also did not execute on our lineouts and our set pieces, and eventually the scoreboard ran away. New Zealand did not have a single moment of dominance. There was not one thing that you could point to. And so I think they are, if that is the message that the All Black camp is taking away from this, that they were a victim of circumstance and things could have gone either way. I would say that the first half, they should have been yellow carded much sooner. I think the referee was slightly lenient, but eventually those things added up, and that's where you see the extra yellow card. And then the red card is obviously just a moment of madness from Barrett, but I think the South Africans entirely dominated, and they definitely need to go to the drawing board. That a few key players like Brody Retallick and Cody Taylor being out, but I can't foresee that they would have made much of a difference. So the All Blacks need to evaluate. I can't, like you said, you asked if I can give them, where it went wrong. It just went wrong everywhere.
From the kickoff. And that's fair. Never mind, you touched on it already. Scott Barrett, and this will take us into our news from all around the rugby world. He has, in fact, been cleared. And there's been quite a few reactions online. People talking about how repeat offenders like Barrett, they just carry on. Like, when are we going to see proper action being taken against players with these kinds of records? He's getting a reputation for being always erring on the side of red. Some were talking about double standards being shown, favoritism, and then also concerns going into a World Cup that it's going to be tough to enforce laws. We've talked about it on every episode so far, how World Rugby, they're starting to protect players, especially when it comes to impact to the head and head injuries. And here was a case where this wasn't followed through. What do you make of what's going on?
Yeah, this one was quite strange because it was not in a sort of rugby activity. It's just foul play.
Yeah.
Which is, you would think it would be a bit more stringent in terms of enforcing the law to make sure that, stamp this out and make sure that people know that this is not something that will be entertained. Yeah, who knows what the rugby board is thinking at this stage. You have a repeat offender in Farrell as well, and the decisions are really questionable. From at least an entertainment point of view, New Zealand will have a player available for them, so I'm sure they are happy with the outcome. But if there is a care and it just does not make sense with the emphasis on head injuries and protecting players.
In other news, someone who will be missing their opener against France is Ty Lomax, who, for a moment in the match, I thought he'd been bitten by a shark. That's what that injury looked like. The cut went really deep, and so the stitches, it was quite a serious sewing mission for Lomax, so much so that he will definitely be missing New Zealand's match against France.
Yeah, he's come along quite nicely. They were touting him as someone that has been quite dominant, at least in the Super Rugby competition. He was coming into some good form. It's tough to judge their props given what the South Africans were doing to them, but it will be a definite miss. The French scrum is also something that is quite, it's one of their strengths, and so obviously having to bed a new player in, and now they have a few young props especially that might not have that experience, so it'll be interesting to see how they adjust. I think for the most part they'll be fine. but it's never good news to lose your starting prop.
And then Dan Biggar announced that he is going to be retiring after the World Cup. He stole some hearts back in 2015 with his pre-kicking dance, his pre-kicking ritual. And of course, there were some excellent kicks from him at that World Cup as well. So yes, the Welsh, they're losing one of their leaders. Do you think they'll miss him? How do you feel about the incoming fly halves? What do you make of the impact that he had?
If you look at the depth and sort of the fly-offs that they've been trotting out, Sam Costello and Gareth Anscombe will definitely be the sort of heir to the throne. But they just, for me, they don't have that sort of class that he has. Obviously, Biggar's been there for a while, but you look at someone like Anscombe, okay, he's only a year younger than Biggar. He just looks younger. We saw what Costello was like, against the sort of Springbok B team. So he's very young. He's only 21. So yeah, they'll have to do some rebuilding. But it is strange to see these older players retiring and still being included in the squad to announce a retirement. I was looking at sort of Jonathan Sexton, seeing when is he going to hang up his boots.
So maybe he's hoping to announce it after he lifts the trophy.
Yes, I think it can work both ways. It might be a motivating factor to end on a high, in Biggar's case. But yeah, I mean, Welsh rugby is sort of undergoing a sort of rebuild, so it gives, I guess, the next person up doesn't give them that pressure of having Biggar, sort of looking over your shoulder. So hopefully it gives the new and up and coming fly off some freedom.
We wish him well. Hopefully it is a good World Cup for him. Not too good, but a good World Cup for him. And he can go on to do other great things. And then finally, there's been quite a lot of talk on the interwebs from old coaches, old managers. Sir Clive Woodward, the World Cup winning coach of England, he's been commiserating with Steve Bothwick. He's just talking about how England is kind of in that place where he was with them way back in the late 90s, early 2000s, before they had that amazing era, the Johnny Wilkinson, Matt Dawson, Martin Johnson era. He's been offering some advice and become quite vocal about the state of English rugby. And I just want our listeners to keep an eye out for that. He comes from a place that's very knowledgeable and he has extensive experience of both sides of the coin. They called it the tour of hell back in the 90s, where they were just going all over the Southern Hemisphere, getting absolutely trashed by the Southern Hemisphere teams. Often then, early 2000s, it was a complete turnaround, and they were doing grand slams, if you will. So he's sharing from that perspective. But what I wanted to touch on, ex-Scotland coach Matt Williams, who is trending, I guess, online, talking about how South Africa are, and I quote, abusing the bench. This is, of course, in response to their 7-1 split on the bench on Friday against the All Blacks. And as far as I know, safety-wise, the rules go. You need specialist players for those first three positions, hooker and your two props. Of course, that's safety in the scrum. They need to know what they're doing. But as far as splits go, 5-3, 6-2, 7-1, I don't know if there are any actual rules against it. It's all people can talk about. They're looking back at this match and they're just, my goodness, they have come alive talking about that 7-1 split on the bench.
Yes, I came across the video and I was really quite shocked to see the comment, and even just the reasoning and the logic behind it just did not make sense. to use a word like abuse, it just strikes me as someone that's, sour. It sounds like a kid in when we're playing maybe in the street playing a game and then someone accuses you of something which has got nothing to do with the actual situation at hand. Well, what's really not taken into account is that New Zealand had 6 forwards on their bench as well. And it's in Jacques' interview after the match, he said, look, it was a necessity because we have a World Cup to be prepare for, and Vali had a niggle and they did not want to risk him. The thing is, the Springboks were dominant in the first half. We kept them scoreless for the longest time. Yeah. And so I think it's just seems to be sour grapes. Like you said, there are rules. We abided by the rules, and by necessity, I had to make a change. Jacques said that it's not something that they are looking to implement because there is risk. If we had the 7 on the bench and the score was reversed, we would definitely be lambasted. So fortunately, at least for the Springboks, that wasn't the case, and I don't foresee it being something that Jacques and Rassi are looking to implement because there is that risk. For example, if you had to think of a flank on the wing versus someone like a Mark Talia, what does that look like? There's massive risk.
I'd love to see Kwacha on the wing.
It's not as if South Africa did this in exclusion of anyone else being able to do it. Everyone's got the capacity to. It's just South Africa. It worked out in our favor. I don't foresee it being something that will be, part of a concerted plan, but it's nice for the coaching team to know that it can be managed. And so I think it's adapt or die. If coaches can't see that as a possibility or can't, make contingency and plan around it, then I think they should be, handing over to someone that has the foresight and the ability to adapt.
That was perfect. If you can't, too bad. Off to something a little better. No sour grapes involved here, although they might be later. Because, hello, Pacific Islanders, they are showing their strength. For me, this past weekend, and I want us to talk about all the results, but can we just take a moment for Fiji and Samoa? Fiji, they, of course, played against England at Twickenham, at an empty Twickenham. It was quite contrasting. Friday night's Twickenham and then Saturday's Twickenham. Sure, shame. But their scrum and maul, amazing. Defense, look, they're in Pool C. They've got Wales, Australia, Georgia, and Portugal. This group is wide open, in my humble opinion. This, I don't know, if they play like that, and they can, I'm excited.
Yeah, this has sort of been a dark horse that people have been touting. A sorely lacking part of Fiji and the Pacific, island nations has been the set piece. We know they individually supremely talented. They can fit in any squad, but just that in terms of cohesion and game planning, I think they were lacking a bit of a fundamentals, like your set pieces, like you mentioned. And I think something that is really been a benefit to them is the Super Rugby competition. We know if you look at the Fiji squad, it's mainly comprising of the Fijian Drua team, and that really plays into combinations, setting up mauling and your set pieces. So that definitely is something that they can build on, and I think it will be quite a bit of promise. Like you said, the group is wide open, so there's definitely opportunity for them to show out and show what they're capable of and build on a solid platform. They were very good in, I wouldn't say untidy, but play that would be a bit more loose.
And
so,
yes.
Yeah, so once they can shore up the main parts of it and then, add their flair and add their strength and add their running ability and their passing ability, it can be quite formidable. Same with Samoa. They've got a really interesting mix of players. They obviously haven't had the benefit of, having a cohesive team and with the new players coming in. But they showed that they really sort of joined together and have a plan at least. It was a bit of dreary conditions against Ireland. But the fact that they were leading for most of the match and kept the match fairly close, if not for a bomb squad of Ireland's own, with their subs making quite a difference, they really could have seen a massive upset. They've got a really unique bunch of players. I like their lock in particular, someone that can really make a difference. So it'll be interesting to see how they get along. Obviously, we haven't seen much of Tonga, which is also one of these Pacific Island teams that could really shake things up. But Fiji, I think, is the pick of the Pacific Island. I think they increased they're up to 7th in the world rankings after that win. So they've shown themselves to be a threat in previous World Cups, but I think that threat is now on another level. And I think they really have the tools and the players to really shock and cause an upset.
Those results: Fiji beating England 30-22, and the Samoans doing a lot but just not enough up against world number 1 Ireland. They came really close. 17-13, that was the final score there. Some other results: Italy, Japan 42-21 to the Italians, and then Scotland 33 points they put up against Georgia, who replied with just the 6. But your pick, of course, was France, Australia. Right now, it seems the hosts, the French, and the defending champions, the Springboks, they're the teams, they're peaking at the right time. They're doing really well. They're clinical. You have to look really closely to see where those flaws are. And some people were talking about their lineouts against Australia, but could it just be that the crowd was too loud and they couldn't actually hear the calls? And that's what threw them off a little bit. Please, I know you were looking forward to that match. What were some of your takes? I
definitely agree with the formed teams being France and the Springboks, and obviously France have that edge being at home, and I think a sort of unseen advantage is just the familiarity of surroundings, not having all these logistical issues, and obviously they can have the setup as they would like, but like you said, it's really tough to pinpoint a weakness in their game, as well as this squad. This squad is quite deep. Obviously, there's the loss of Intermark, and Jamine had a really good game. They fly off. They had some impressive runs, although we are grading on a curve here. It seemed like both the Tasman teams were not at their best. It will be interesting to see. I think we'll get a better understanding of where New Zealand and France are after that first match. It's really turning out to be something that I think there's maybe less than 3 points that separate the top 5 teams in the world rankings. And I think everyone on their day really can deliver up a performance like we've seen across the weekends. Australia, I'm really not sure what to think about them. I've seen some interesting stats. I saw it on Twitter regarding the changes since Eddie Jones has taken over. So they are passing more, they are running more, they are kicking more, and they are making more line breaks. It's just execution in those moments. I know Eddie said this World Cup will be one that we won't forget. I am, hesitant to count this man out. He's proved himself time and time again. It might be that they take a few, like we said, their group is wide open. It takes a few games to really get clicking, and I still think they will be a threat, just because I have really much respect for Eddie Jones and what he's accomplished. And then I think Georgia, Scotland was also an interesting game to see.
You're championing Scotland, though.
I don't know if you saw Finn Russell's try assist for Duan van der Merwe.
And you're the president of Finn Russell's fan club.
No, I'm unashamed. This man has been playing some really enterprising rugby, and just the form that he's in, it's something that does give me some cold sweats at night. I think overall we should be able to take care of business, but it seemed as soon as they unleashed him and allowed him to do what he is capable of doing, the game changed completely in the second half. So Georgia was really interesting. keeping it tight, and I think that's how they will, pursue the game. It's sort of the opposite of Fiji. No flair, all discipline, all set pieces. And I think that can frustrate a lot of teams, and so they might get some joy. It was a nice start. We are now looking forward to the main courses.
You call it a starter, I call it the best meal I've had in years. Yes, we're back on the Boks versus the All Blacks. These were starters, they were warm-ups, they're meaningless, no points, no positions in the pools. It has absolutely nothing to do with the World Cup. Boy oh boy, there was so much to enjoy and to be delighted by. Now, I don't know who said it first. It could be Kobani Bobo, former Sharks player and now Supersport pundit, or Craig Ray, renowned rugby journalist, and I believe he's the sport editor at Daily Maverick. One of them started with it, but I've heard it now multiple times from them. They're calling the Springboks pythons in their ability to suffocate the opposition. And if we look back at the last time the All Blacks played the Springboks, and that was in Auckland, right?
Yeah.
They put up that quick 17 points. We couldn't breathe. There was nowhere to go. We were stunned, and that set the pace for the whole match. But the opposite was true in this match. We knew what we had to do. We had to get out of the blocks quickly and, start that choke. There was a point in the match, I think it was 20 minutes on, we were parked in their half, and the score was 0-0. It was incredible, the work that we'd put in, how tired they were looking. There were no points on the board, and yet we were dominating. We were putting a stamp on the match. We were in complete control. I get it. I get the Python analogy. That was already enough to take into the World Cup, that intensity, that dominance, and that intention. I loved it.
There's not much that I disagree with in terms of how you've described it. Like you said, the python will constrict and limit movement and eventually eat or consume the prey. And I think that's analogous to the 0-0 scoreline. That constriction was taking place for that period, but we just couldn't find, or at least we did not eat until I think CS opened the scoring for us. Last half empty sort of reflection. That is something that did concern me a bit in terms of our execution. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there were sort of mitigating circumstances in the infringements from the All Blacks, but I did feel like we were lacking sort of just a cutting edge, and we could have made it much more comprehensive. Small things that just showed up just upon rewatching. Our delivery of passes being very much not in the bread basket but higher up in our carrying, which sort of slowed down our carry and allowed the All Blacks to infringe. So I'm sure Rassi and Jacques and the coaching team will be looking at that just in terms of planning ahead, seeing how the play is developing and anticipating things. I think we can show some a bit more guile in those areas. But like you said, for the most part, really encouraging, and that constriction especially, not allowing the All Blacks to have any moment of peace or even their relieving kicks. I remember Peter Steff in particular charging everything down to hurry it, and this is while we're dominating. And so it just really shows the ethos of the team to not give up. There was a game maybe before the British and Irish Lions, I don't know if you recall, where Faf passes from the line out and then Adi Surveyor intercepts and he scores that try. Yeah, if you look at a few lineouts, you will see Adi does the same thing, and you can see Faf holds the ball for much longer, waits until he comes into view, and then passes around him. And so you can see that the Springbok team is definitely paying attention, and it's a team that's really learning from their mistakes, knowing their opposition and knowing what to expect. And that for me is a slight on the All Black team to not know that we would have done our homework and come up with something a bit more fresher and newer. And so that gave me, it just put a smile on my face to see that the boys and the team are growing. I do have a question question from one of our listeners. This is from Regan, and he asks, was the convincing win over the All Blacks psychologically a positive or a negative for the Boks in terms of the mind frame that they will go into the World Cup?
Excellent question, Regan. Thank you. I was taken by the post-match ceremony, the award ceremony, the trophy and the glitter and things. We didn't look like we just won something. We looked very focused, especially Sia leading from the front. And in all the talks, I believe Dwayne Vermeulen was interviewed this week, and all he's talking about is Scotland. Even Damien, in his Man of the Match presentation, they're all talking about the work that needs to be done. So I think there's you're talking about how they're learning from mistakes with reference to the Ardie Severe intercept. That's the learning, the curiosity, the focus, and the looking ahead. It's seen. Us as fans, we can see this. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but it doesn't look like the players are. And that also, I want to laud Sia for that, because he is humility. He's grounded. He is that kind of person who takes nothing for granted. And I'm sure that trickles down to the rest of the team. Yes, this is great, and this is part of the learning. This is part of the preparation. This is by no means a destination.
I think I definitely would agree. I don't think the Springboks were lacking the belief, that we could beat the All Blacks. We beat them soundly in Mbombela. It was more or less the same team as well, and I think it's an encouragement for those that weren't playing in that particular match. So someone like Andre says, and obviously Kane and Moody in his first start at centre, and then Kirtley as well. So I think for those guys, it's sort of just to build that foundation to say that, these guys aren't this unbeatable mountain that cannot be reached. So every word that has come out of the team, not the fans, but the team themselves, has been, we are focused on Scotland. And this is the culmination of our 8-year plan. So I don't think the players are affected by it. Even, there weren't crazy celebrations afterwards, like you said, and it was a record win. We can't take that away from it. Even though it's not in the World Cup, it's still a test match. It's still a very strong All Black team. You would think that the way they dominated, they would have an ego, but it's just head down and focusing on the next game.
Coming up this weekend, there aren't any matches, so our next episode will focus on the World Cup, on those first matchups, on player matchups. We'll bring you some trivia and interesting facts, and then of course looking at those pools and what we were expecting. What do you think the Springboks are going to be focusing on in this final week ahead of Scotland? You talked about the execution. We did leave a lot of points on the field. We did lack a little in finishing. And then those missed tackles that were talked about. So we need to, look at some defensive exercises. But what do you think we're going to be focusing on looking ahead? We've got all these great takeouts, our set pieces, the lineouts that we've stolen, our 12 and 13 combination who look like they've been playing together since birth. Where do you think the focus will be going into the Scotland match?
Yeah, I think execution would definitely be prime, something that needs to be addressed. These guys are so much foresight in their planning, so I think they've sort of been tweaking, and obviously there's been some injuries as well. I'm sure some time will be allocated for rehabilitation, but there was something that Jacques said, that he said the training that he gave the people that did not play, so the rest of the squad, was made to be of a similar intensity that they assumed the New Zealand game, which I thought was very insightful as into how they are approaching this World Cup. I know people are making fun of the 7-1 bench, but it seems as if Jacques and Rassie are really looking at this as a squad World Cup, and that the squad is going to win the World Cup, and so they're not reliant on these important players. Obviously we have key pieces, but it seems like they are setting up a system where it is plug and play to an extent. Obviously, we know that there's certain players like Lucanio and Andre Pollard that can make a difference, but it's the foundation that will allow all of our players to flourish, irrespective of, who is on the match day 23. In terms of how they are going to prepare, I think they foresee a tough Scottish test, which I think is going to be the case. It just as a counterpoint to us not taking chances. We did not give any chances away because that is typically our Achilles heel is dominance, but no points. And in this case, we were dominating and not giving points. And so, like I said, there's that growth that's occurring with the team. And so the focus was maintained on both sides of the ball.
I'm sure you listening, you have your thoughts as well, whether it's on that Springbok All Black match, whether it's predictions for the World Cup, which is just days away. We'd love to hear from you right here where you're listening, whether it's on Buzzsprout or Apple and soon to be Spotify, or if you found us on YouTube, welcome. Please, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. You can find us on Twitter. Find us at Nice Try for Fans or BSG Productions, or send an email to bsgproductions@outlook.com. We want to hear from you. This is a community and we love learning from you and hearing your input. Last episode, we looked at the hooker, the number 2 position in the lineup, and we had a difference of opinion, very small, but Tim voted for our dear captain in the cauldron, John Smith, and I went with Bismarck du Plessis, and I was joined in my campaign for Bismarck du Plessis by several listeners, including someone who's become a regular listener, Ricky. Thank you so much for your input. And then also we had some more current choices, being Malcolm Marx. And of course, Tim, I know that second only to Finn Russell, Malcolm Marx is your favorite. And in the stats, he's leading. I mean, against the All Black, his try took him equal or ahead of Skalkberger.
Yeah, he's ahead of Skalk. He was equal, and now he's taken that position for himself.
Well, like you said, if he wins this, his second World Cup, then he could statistically be, the most successful Springbok hooker of all time. So we'll keep our eye on him, as I'm sure all of the opposition does. Hello, looking at you, Scott Barrett. Today, we're going to be looking at the locks, numbers 4 and 5. And we're doing this together because it is a combination that, if it's off, it's off. Tim, your picks for numbers 4 and 5, your lock pairing for our all-time greatest Springbok lineup, please.
I really don't think there can be any sort of disagreement here. We just have to go to our most capped Springbok of all time. And it has to be Mr. Victor Matfield.
Okay.
Victorino, as I like to call him.
Oh, okay.
Known only to me as Victorino. He's won everything there is to win. Great captain, line out. Wow, is there a word? I think if you Google line out, Victor Matfield is winning a line out. A student of the game. He's found himself on the commentary box as well. Yeah, Victor's just been a class act throughout his career. There hasn't been a particular time where I've said, he struggled. I think he finished on high as well. And I mean, he's a true SA product. He's played under 21, under 23, SAA, and obviously the Springboks. Just a total package, everything that you want. Maybe not as dominant as some other locks, or when you think of your Brad Thorns and his partner at the Bulls, like someone like Bakkies. But Victor had it all. He wasn't afraid to front up physically, but he had some nice touches. I remember seeing Victor on the wing.
Yes.
He has
the grubbers.
A couple of try assists, definitely to Habana as well. Just a rugby really aficionado and a rugby brain, and being able to execute wherever he is placed. you would want to put him with his lifelong partner at the Bulls, Bakkies. But unfortunately, I need to go for Eben Etzebeth. I can't look past Etzebeth.
No, you literally can't look past him.
He's like the epitome of a specimen, able to exert himself on the game. There's not a game where you watch Eben play and you're not aware of his presence. He's come along as well. Also someone that can play in the rough. That's definitely his forte, but also has the ability to play the more attacking side of things. And one thing that's very underrated, if you watch him particularly remonstrate with referees, is his knowledge of the game and his knowledge of the law. There's many times where Eben will go and pick up the ball because he knows, the ruck hasn't been formed because someone's arm is not attached to the ruck. And that is very in-depth knowledge of, an application of the law. And I've seen him do that many times. And he's always in, conversation to ask, okay, is this clear, or not? And he's really been a stalwart in this sort of golden era of Springbok rugby. He's really put his body on the line for us. Victor and Eben shared very few games, but for me, there's no locks that really come close to their contribution, their production, and their success.
What makes our locks so special is because none of our locks have had an easy dominance in the world. When they've been the best because they've gone up against the best, and that's what's earned them such great respect. You talk about Victor Matfield, 100% in agreement with you. I think he's stolen more line-out balls than any other lock in the world. I'm pretty sure there has to be a stat on that, and it's fact. It's written somewhere. And in 2007, in our World Cup victory, he was player of the tournament. That speaks to the kind of impact he has in the team and in our performance. While I agree with you on Eben Etzebeth, I want to say he is who he is because of the original enforcer, Bakkies Botha, who was physical, abrasive, aggressive. I think what sets Etzebeth apart, or what helps him lead the way a little bit, is leadership and how he's had to be a leader, and in that his discipline has been better for it. Where Bakkies, his discipline is what brings him down for me a little bit in comparison to Etzebeth. Victor and Bakkies together, they've won 3 Super Rugby titles. They won that World Cup in 2007, and then of course there's the 2009 British and Irish Lions tour. And so they set the standard for the Etzebeths and the Luits and the Archias of the world to come up and be as excellent and even surpass them. So those are our lock choices. We'd love to hear from you. Who knows? Maybe you've got some Mark Andrews trivia for us that'll change our mind. Whatever it is, please do let us know. You know where to find us. At email address, it's bsgproductions@outlook.com, or find us on Twitter at Nice Try for Fans. And then, of course, right here on your podcast channel, you can comment as well. Tim, it's been a blast. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you, and I look forward to so much more as the World Cup draws near.
Oh, thank you. So next week, looking to preview what's coming up and encourage the listeners to provide any sort of feedback and any questions. Thank you for the questions that we have received, and hopefully that next week will be a nice interactive show.
Please do join us next time right here on Nice Try for the Fans.